Nestled in the rolling hills and lush landscapes of the bluegrass state, Frankfort, Kentucky stands as a testament to the rich tapestry of American history and culture. With its charming blend of heritage and modernism, this city has played a pivotal role in shaping the course of the nation, particularly when it comes to its significant contribution to bourbon history. Frankfort's origins date back to the late 18th century, when it was established as the state capital of Kentucky in 1792. Its strategic location along the Kentucky River made it a hub for trade and commerce, facilitating the growth of a diverse and vibrant community. Over the years, Frankfort has retained its small-town charm while evolving into a center of government, education, and culture. One of the most remarkable aspects of Frankfort is its preservation of historical landmarks. The city boasts a collection of well-preserved 19th century architecture, including the old state capitol, a stunning Greek Revival building that served as the seat of government from 1830 to 1910. Frankfort, Kentucky is much more than a picturesque town. It is a living chronicle of America's past and a symbol of its enduring spirit. Its historical significance, coupled with its pivotal role in bourbon history, cements its place in American heritage. As visitors walk its streets and take in the sights and sounds of this charming city, they are reminded of the invincible spirit that has shaped the nation, making Frankfort a destination that captures the heart and soul of America's journey.
One of my very favorite musicians of all time is a guy named Chris Christopherson. Early in his career, he wrote a song called The Best of All Possible Worlds. And to me, that's what Frankfort is. It's the best of the large, it's the best of the small. It's the best of the rich, it's the best of the poor.
Frankfort's a great city to raise a family because really of its small town charm. We're close to bigger cities like Lexington and Louisville, but small enough, to just really have a sense of community and close neighbors and friendly people. We care a lot about our local residents, and it's just a nice small city.
We've got such a rich history here, and we've got the History Museum, the City Museum, you've got Salado, you've got Buffalo Trace, you've got an amazing library, just a community that, in the amount of time we've lived here, I swear I have more friends than I have accumulated in all of the other places I've lived, including other states.
We're a friendly town. We're an old town steeped in history. And folks come here not just for the bourbon history, but for the history of Kentucky, the history of Frankfort. And I think that makes it special. Its people are special. We're a rural community. People say hi to each other.
It's just a phenomenal place, and it's the people who live here, they love it here, whether they've lived here 6 months or they've lived here 6 decades. And it's how it is. It's Frankfort.
I don't think you can talk about bourbon without talking about Frankfort. I think if we look at the early history of distilling of bourbon at least, and we look at those names, the Colonel E.H. Taylor, George T. Stagg, Albert Blanton, Elmer T. Lee. Those are names, when you hear them, you immediately think of bourbon. They all lived here in Frankfort. They all distilled here in Frankfort. And I think that's one of the reasons why Frankfort is really the heart of bourbon.
Frankfort's significance extends beyond its architectural heritage and overall charm. It holds a special place in the hearts of bourbon enthusiasts as the heart of bourbon country. Bourbon, America's native spirit, has deep roots in Kentucky, and Frankfort is at the epicenter of its storied history. The city's proximity to the famed bluegrass region, with its fertile soil and ideal climate for growing grains, has made it an ideal location for the production of this amber elixir. Not to mention it was home to some of the most significant figures in all of bourbon history.
Well, hello. My name is Colonel E.H. Taylor, Jr. I've devoted my life to the craftsmanship of fine bourbon whiskey and the distilling industry in and around Frankfort, Kentucky. As I stand here today, I'm honored and humbled to reflect on all that we have built. I think about the Hermitage Distillery, I think about OFC, I think about Carlisle, I think about my crowning achievement right here, the old Taylor Distillery, now Castle and Key. I think about the labor, the sweat, the toil. I think about the commitment. I think about the investment. And we all came together and contributed to building something great here in Frankfort and the surrounding area. Those that have gone before me are key players as well. We would be remiss if we did not mention Dr. Crow, Oscar Pepper, Colonel Blanton, all key players in what we've come to know and love. There's a feeling here in Frankfort, Kentucky. There's a feeling here at Castle and Key. You can feel it at Buffalo Trace. Walk through the rick house, walk through the distillery, and feel the presence of the souls that have built what you see. Their commitment ensures that fine bourbon distilling will continue forever.
Frankfort is bourbon history. It doesn't matter where you look in Frankfort, you find bourbon history. I like to say Frankfort has a history with bourbon, just because, I walk down the street and I see the house that E.H. Taylor lived in. You look at the housing market and you see houses that master distillers once occupied. I drive past old Granddad Distillery or I drive past Old Crow Distillery on my way to work, and it doesn't matter where you turn in Frankfort, bourbon history is everywhere.
It's the heartbeat of bourbon. It's the beginning of the bourbon story. There's so much of it that started here in Frankfort. Of course, we've got Buffalo Trace, and that distillery, the longest continuously operating distillery in the country. So many of the forefathers were here, and the stories that come from that, the people who have come from that, the generations that still live here. It's the beginning of bourbon, and it still is bourbon.
The reason we stand out as a bourbon-centric location is really based on our history, the fact that there were so many distilleries operating here before Prohibition. It was kind of bourbon central at that point in time. The Kentucky River is another big part of what makes Frankfort a bourbon-centric location, and still is.
I find it incredibly fortunate that Frankfort happens to be so centric in this bourbon industry, because it allows people from all over the world to come and visit this beautiful little town. We get people from Asia, Europe, just all over the place. And it's really amazing because the world is so big, but a lot of people end up here and they love visiting this town.
There's hundreds of thousands of people that visit Frankfort every year for the good work that our current distilleries and master distillers are putting out. But at the end of the day, Frankfort has a story to tell. And if you look for it, you're going to see exactly what Frankfort has been putting out for over 200 years.
The history of bourbon flows through its streets like a slow, warming stream, with each distillery standing as a testament to the artistry and craftsmanship that have defined this region for centuries. While there are many distilleries that have been added to the historical roster of Frankfort, at the heart of our story are 3 distilleries: OFC, Old Crow, and Old Taylor, each bearing witness to a storied past, while still operating in some capacity today. The OFC distillery stands as a living link to bourbon's aristocratic past. Originally established by Colonel Edmund Haynes Taylor Jr., OFC showcases the elegance of a bygone era. The ornate architecture of its aging warehouses and the meticulous attention to detail in its production process mirror the sophistication of a time when bourbon was a symbol of refinement. Buffalo Trace Distillery now stands there as a living tribute to the captivating bourbon history of Frankfort, Kentucky. Through their meticulously curated tours and immersive experiences, Buffalo Trace Distillery offers visitors a journey into the past, where they can explore the historic buildings and warehouses that have witnessed centuries of bourbon craftsmanship. The distillery's commitment to preserving traditional techniques and recipes reflects their deep respect for Frankfort's distilling history, while also fostering innovation and experimentation. As an iconic fixture in the bourbon landscape, Buffalo Trace not only produces exceptional spirits, but also serves as a guardian of the narrative that intertwines Frankfort's history with the art of distilling.
I've been here 17 years in Frankfort, and what I find most interesting about our history is the fact that America really has a lot to thank for our movement westward from this vantage point right here behind me. So when we talk about boats moving up and down the Kentucky River, it's right here. That below us is today known as Buffalo Trace, but in the 1700s, it had no name. It wasn't until the 1800s distilleries started growing out of here. We have just an amazing history across those distilleries. 1869, a guy named E.H. Taylor Jr. shows up on scene. He puts in a distillery that was not just the American version, but the European version. The guy came with experience from time spent overseas. He applies it here. He had American experience with bourbon itself just down the river at Hermitage, and all of this relates to Frankfort history.
E.H. Taylor Jr., Colonel E.H. Taylor Jr. bought the distillery from Daniel Swigert in 1869. He bought it for $6,000, and he spent $70,000 to modernize it. So that's how he got into buying the distillery. When E.H. Taylor Jr. bought the distillery from Daniel Swigert, it was the Leestown Distillery when Daniel Swigert owned it. And in 1870, after E.H. Taylor bought it, he renamed the distillery OFC. And that stands for Old Fire Copper, because he wanted everybody to know the bourbon touched nothing but copper. So that made it a premium whiskey back then. E.H. Taylor is considered the father of the modern bourbon industry, because he was the first one to use the tall column stills that we use today. He improved the grain receiving process and the sour mash process. All those improvements he made we're still using today. So that's pretty much his big influence in the bourbon industry. And he insisted on quality and that copper stills and everything. Even his fermenters were copper lined. He ran into some financial problems right around middle 1870s. So George T. Stagg was a whiskey wholesaler, and he saw a good business opportunity. So because Taylor was having financial problems, and he was one of Taylor's customers actually, because he was a whiskey wholesaler. So Stagg came out in 1878 and purchased the distillery and bailed Taylor out. So that's how he got started at the OFC distillery. He wanted to continue calling it OFC, but he had to change it to the George T. Stagg Distillery in 1904. So he kept it up pretty good too.
And E.H. Taylor was a perfectionist, not only in his distilling, but in his distillery. It's where he and Stagg ran into problems, because Taylor wanted to do everything the best way it could be done. And Stagg didn't necessarily agree with that. Stagg was more of a, how cheap can we fix this? Saying, you know, we got a leaky pipe over here. Well, Stagg was all about wrapping a rag around it, maybe a little tape and a piece of wire, and see if you keep it from dripping on the floor. Taylor was about calling down to the shop and getting a new piece of pipe and replacing the one that was leaking. They didn't get along.
Imagine being a 16-year-old kid living across the street from this distillery, coming to look for work. That's what this guy did. He started here as an office boy. When he did a good job there, they moved him up. And then they moved him up from there. And they moved him up from there. And as you see, he did a pretty good job at it. So, we have a guy named Albert Blanton, who became a president of a distillery at a time most wouldn't want to inherit a distillery. 1920, he is now being considered for the presidency. If anybody knows American history, 1920 was the same year that an unfortunate event befell the United States. It's called Prohibition. But this guy, he decided that this distillery deserved better. And in this case, he ended up getting us a little thing called a permit from the federal government. That permit allowed us to make what was called medicinal whiskey. For 13 years, this distillery, what is today known as Buffalo Trace, was able to make medicinal whiskey and did it legally in the United States. So we have him to thank for that. But then 13 years later, you've got the end of Prohibition coming. I think the bigger part of his story really comes from that, because he had a distillery open, operating, and now had a leg up on the competition. So he, with the forethought, got other big conglomerates involved at a time where money was king. You could flow it into this place and make this place even bigger than it was prior to Prohibition. And that's exactly what happened.
He would have parties in his mansion, and he would send workers down to one of the warehouses that he built to pick out barrels for his parties. And Elmer T. Lee, as a matter of fact, was one of these workers that was sent to the warehouse. And they would pull a barrel and they would give these bottles to guests at the party and even family and friends. So that he just really built the distillery up successfully. Elmer T. Lee started working at Buffalo Trace. Well, it wasn't Buffalo Trace then. It was still the George T. Stagg Distillery. But he started working at the Stagg Distillery in 1949. He got out of World War II. He started as an engineer there. Matter of fact, the first day he came, he applied for work. Albert Blanton was in charge there. So the first day he came to apply for a job, Albert Blanton says, "I'm sorry, son, we're not hiring today." So he left, and Orville Shupp was like the distillery manager. And he stopped Elmer. He says, "Look, you come here tomorrow and you can start working." And so that's how Elmer T. Lee got started there. And Albert Blanton saw Elmer, and he said, "I thought I told you we weren't hiring." So that's how he got started there. And he like I said, he started as an engineer and eventually became the master distiller. And he's the reason for the Elmer T. Lee bourbon. He would personally pick out the barrels himself for the Elmer T. Lee. And he's responsible for the Blanton's bourbon, because people weren't drinking bourbon like in the middle 1970s, early 80s. They were drinking everything but bourbon. So Elmer went back to Warehouse H, which was the warehouse that Albert Blanton built. And he would pull barrels like he did for Albert Blanton. And he would bottle from these individual barrels. So that's how the Blanton's bourbon got started. Blanton's was the first single barrel bourbon to be sold commercially in 1984.
Buffalo Trace is renowned for the legendary figures who have shaped the bourbon industry as we know it today. Yet perhaps its most significant contribution to history lies in the discovery of what they call Bourbon Pompeii. This pre-Prohibition distillery, once operated by Colonel E.H. Taylor Jr. himself, offers a fascinating glimpse into the past and a deeper understanding of bourbon's rich heritage.
In the 1930s, progress meant money, but at the loss of history. Thankfully, we can undig a little bit of the past. Right here, you get a sense of the wall created to make a new distillery in the 1930s. But here you have a window to the past, literally, that existed in the 1800s. We have lost it, but we've also found it. And that's what we're going to see in the next room over.
Part of the 1883 distillery is still standing. We have boilers in the old distillery building that produce steam to run the stills and the cookers and to heat the warehouses during the winter. Well, one part of that building where the 1883 distillery, we were using as storage for several years. Ever since the last thing made there was Dickel, believe it or not, in 1964. And after that, it was basically used as storage in that building. So we decided we wanted to put in a meeting and event space in that building. So in April of 2016, there was a concrete floor that had to be dug up to start working on the building to improve it. And we're digging through this concrete floor. Part of a wall was uncovered. We brought in Nick Laraquenti, and he started digging. There were several layers of silt and everything. He started digging through these levels. There were 3 distilleries from the 1800s that were uncovered, parts of them. When E.H. Taylor Jr. bought the distillery in 1869, the distillery building that was there wasn't big enough. He tore that down. So we found part of the outside wall from that distillery. And then he built a distillery in 1873 to replace the one he tore down. And that got hit by fire in 1882 and burned down. So we found the cornerstone from that distillery. And we uncovered 4 14,000-gallon fermenters from the 1883 distillery. So we give tours through there now. Because with Sazerac owning the distillery, when we found something like that, we weren't just going to cover it up. They could have said, hey, look, this is a great place to put some more stills or whatever to make more bourbon. No, they didn't do that. They preserved it. And now we're giving tours through there to show people what that looked like back in the past.
So a distillery that sat here doing amazing things across time didn't know that it was going to do even more amazing things when it came to 1999, when a new product called Buffalo Trace was unveiled to the world. But that didn't just happen overnight. 1992, a company called Sazerac came into the picture, purchasing this distillery and amplifying what was produced here slowly but surely. So where did the name Buffalo Trace come from? 1999, after paying a little bit of attention to our history, leadership decided that Buffalo Trace was the right name because of the history that passed through exactly where we're standing today. This is known as a Buffalo Trace. This was a funnel across what is known as the Kentucky River behind us here, and this was called the Great Crossing as a result of the buffalo that came from the north down through the south and off to the west. It's an amazing piece of American history. Fortunately, buffalo aren't roaming through this area today, but we like to think of it as a place to honor them.
Further down the path, the spirit of Dr. James C. Crow lives on at the Old Crow Distillery. Dr. Crow's pioneering work in the 19th century laid the groundwork for understanding the scientific nuances of distillation. His contributions, including the enhancement of the sour mash process, have become integral to bourbon production. The rickhouses where the barrels once rested still harbor the sweet aroma of aged oak, a tribute to his legacy. Today, Glens Creek Distillery has breathed new life into the historic grounds of the once abandoned Old Crow Distillery. With a deep reverence for the region's distilling heritage, Glens Creek has meticulously restored the aging bottling warehouse and repurposed the facilities to craft exceptional spirits. The distillery's founders saw the potential of this historic site and its connection to the renowned Old Crow legacy. Today, Glens Creek Distillery stands as a testament to the enduring spirit of innovation and tradition, producing fine whiskeys that pay homage to the past, while forging a new path for the future of Kentucky bourbon.
The history of the place intrigued me. The history of Old Crow brand, the 125 years of being a top shelf bourbon, really, with the exception of Prohibition. And, so I drove out here, and I had no idea these places were here. I'd been to Woodford Reserve once in 1999, and that's the only distillery I'd ever been to. So I really knew nothing about the distillery industry or distilling when I first started.
So what we're going to do is take a little walk here on the Old Crow Distillery property. We don't do this very often. We did some a few years ago, and it's been a while since we've taken anybody back there. One thing you have to remember, this was an industrial facility, so it was not built for tourism. And what's here is in a state of dilapidated glory.
When I saw this place and the story of this place, then it just like a switch went off. It's, hey, let's start a distillery. And that's kind of how it started. Documenting things back in that time period wasn't exactly, there's not a lot of things that you could look at. There was no video or things that you could say, oh, here's exactly what Crow did. He's credited with refining or perfecting or bringing science to the sour mashing process. From my estimation, some version of sour mashing had been done likely for quite a long time. But he was a distiller at the Woodford, what's now known as Woodford Reserve. At that time, it was a pepper distillery, and he was a distiller there, established his brand in 1835. Okay, so we know that he passed away in 1856, and then at some point the rights to that brand passed on to Taylor, who acquired that, and then this distillery was built in the 1870s, so 20 years after Crow passed. So there's an old Paul Sawyer painting of the old Crow Distillery prior to this one. So it's obviously not this one. It's a small, and in the painting, it's from a distance, but it looks like a barn. And apparently it was fairly common, makes sense, that you would have a distillery and a livestock operation right there so that you could get rid of your spent grains with the livestock. And it was Crow who supposedly suggested, it might be a good idea if we separate the animals from the distilling, and kind of, because, stories of pigs and cows and stuff just walking around inside of the distilleries, and probably mud floors. It wouldn't have been a place where, in today's world, where you go there and say, "Ooh, gee, I think I want to have a drink."
Were it not for Dr. Crow, you would never have heard of Colonel E.H. Taylor. But when Taylor was exposed to the work of Dr. Crow, just down the road from where we're sitting at the old pepper distillery, he realized he had stumbled upon a gold mine. He was working every day with people at Pepper Distillery who had trained, who had been taught by Dr. Crow. And his methodology extends into today, and it will extend into the future, because nobody has found a better approach to distilling bourbon whiskey than Dr. Crow had decades ago.
This area that we're getting ready to see, to me, is just a really strange portion of this whole facility, because I told you out front that it was an industrial site designed to make 400 barrels of bourbon. What I think really happened, Colonel Taylor, financier, George Stagg, financier, they happened to be able to gather up lots of money. They happened to put their money into bourbon, so they got connected with the bourbon industry. The story goes that Taylor got into some financial difficulty with construction projects and had to sell Old Taylor to keep the other ones going. Kind of pissed him off, because now he doesn't own the distillery that's making the bourbon with his name on it, right? So he came down here and built this place at 400 barrels a day. 9 years later, he went down and built Old Taylor at 280. And at some point, he went over and built Old Granddad, 380 a day. So now he has capacity of about 1,100 barrels, is what Buffalo Trace was producing just until recently. I don't know what the capacity is now. But he had a rather large footprint. People say he's responsible for 7 distilleries. I can only name 4, so I stick with the 4 I can name. If somebody adds one to it that we can document, we'll up him to 5. But pretty big bourbon footprint in the Frankfort area.
I don't know the exact timeline there. And the OFC, or now Buffalo Trace, was first, and this was probably second. And then the story says that when he got financially overextended there, and they had to sell off OFC to George T. Stagg. And in that transaction, somehow he lost his signature brand, E.H. Taylor, and that's why Buffalo Trace produces it today. And so we figured, well, he probably wasn't happy about that. So he said, well, you know what? I'm just going to come over here and build another distillery and put Old Taylor on the front of it and get my name back. But I don't know that that's actually written down anywhere, that there's any actual evidence that that's what happened. But that's the time period. We know that Old Taylor was built later than this one, and this one was built later than Buffalo Trace.
You look at some of the others, I think of Oscar Pepper. Of course, Dr. Crow worked for Oscar Pepper for many, many years. And together, they crafted and produced Old Crow. Old Crow would become the largest selling bourbon in the United States. New York, Atlanta, Cincinnati, New Orleans, the largest. To this day, you can go into some of those old bars in New Orleans and see that big crow on the wall.
My name is Robert W. Robinson, commonly referred to as Bob. I started in a distillery here in the lab as a chemist and worked my way up to under national distillers to be superintendent of the Old Crow plant. When I came out here in '66, they had just had an expansion or an upgrade in the early '60s. Well, when I came out here, I had a few people here ask me, said, what happened to Crow whiskey? And I didn't have anything to say. It was just like it was the day I came. That's all I can tell you. And a lot of people felt like Crow whiskey went bad after that expansion. And it was one of the main reasons for the demise of the bourbon industry. Was right here. Because sales started dropping here. And to me, I didn't see any difference in it. And of course I wouldn't have. And in 1983, I found out why. During that expansion or upgrade, whatever you want to call it, there was a formulation error made and nobody caught it. They allowed me, I found all of the data and all of the data that I needed to prove what happened. Here, they were making 3,100 bushels a day. Today, they're making 4,600. The formulation that they use here is not the same formulation used here. This is not near as good as this. Well, in '83, I presented all this to the powers to be, and they allowed me to make the change that was necessary to get it back to there. But I didn't get to make that much of it, so they sold it out from underneath me.
In a surprising turn of events, the largest selling bourbon in the United States ceased production, and the distillery ultimately closed its doors. However, in 2014, the Glens Creek Distillery team came in and began revitalizing the historic site, bringing it back to life.
So when I bought the place, of course, the history of the place was intriguing. The building is magnificent. I've always had a fascination with the industrial period of the early industrial revolution and how people started figuring out how to make things. And you look at those boilers back there and you go, man, how are people figuring that out at that time period without computers and without computer controlled machinery and so forth? And so that was real appealing to me in terms of the place. And so when I put together a business plan, it was a three-phase plan that said, look, step one is establish production, establish a business. You got to have a business if you're going to keep going. Establish a successful business. So we've accomplished that. Step two was preservation. Stop the destruction, mainly from water because roofs aren't maintained or that sort of thing. So we've invested quite a bit in the last couple of years because we're financially capable to repair the roofs on this building and the building next door, and I'm getting some work done on some of the older structures around back. Okay, so as finances allow, we're trying to keep the history. I mean, my vision was I'd love to respect the history of this place, respect the people who worked here. A lot of people put in a lot of time and years here, and to try to keep that alive. The integrity of the place, what it was. It was a factory. I mean, it was a workhorse. They made the majority of the bourbon. That's just the way I'd like to keep it preserved. So 100 years from now, people can say, "Oh man, look, 200 years ago, whatever, when this place was built, this is the way the world was." We've forgotten. I mean, some of us, we've never known life without electricity. This building was built before electricity. We have to go back and imagine what things would have been like. And for people, 100, 200 years ago, it would have been so different. So 100 years from now, I'd like for people to be able to imagine, right, what this place was and what went on here, and be able to look at those boilers in awe like we still do and say, oh my gosh, look at that. These people put this together way back when, before we've got all the modern things that make that all easier now. Okay, and so it was production, preservation, and then finally restoration, and not to restore it to what it was. It could never be what it was. It just wouldn't be at all practical. So some museum kind of thing to preserve it, not to clean it up, make it shiny, but to say, look here, this is a boiler room. It was hot, it was dirty, it was noisy. This is the reality of what it was. And then a working distillery space where we could continue to make spirits that are going to appeal to people. So that's kind of the vision I've had in my head. And if anybody out there would like to come and partner up with probably $20 or $30 million it would take, we can achieve that.
Finally, the Old Taylor Distillery stands as a testament to the rich legacy of American whiskey making. Established in the 1880s by Colonel E.H. Taylor, Jr., a pioneering figure in the bourbon industry, the distillery played a significant role in shaping the character of Kentucky bourbon. For decades, it produced high-quality spirits until its eventual closure. Today, the hallowed grounds of the Old Taylor Distillery have found new life as the home of Castle and Key Distillery. This transition not only honors the past, but also carries forward the distilling heritage, with Castle and Key embracing innovation while respecting the craftsmanship of those who came before. The echoes of Old Taylor's legacy can still be felt as Castle and Key continues to produce exceptional bourbons, bridging the gap between history and modernity.
We know that there is a distillery somewhere on this property as early as the late 1700s, early 1800s. This would have been like a farmer miller distillery, people just turning their excess grains into things like moonshine and whatnot. So that would have been the Johnson Miller Distillery. And it later goes on to become the Old Taylor Distillery. E.H. Taylor levels the distillery that was out here back in the day and starts building this limestone castle as his distillery. It takes 13 years of construction to bring that distillery to life. So from 1887 until 1900, this is just a construction zone, but it officially opens back up as a distillery come 1900. So after E.H. Taylor opens it up in 1900, it is operational until 1920 when Prohibition goes into place. It shutters its doors for 16 years, from 1920 till 1936. It's opened back up by National Distillers, one of those 6 medicinal alcohol sellers from Prohibition, and they have it in operation until 1972. It shutters its doors that summer, and that is the last time there's any distillation for the next 44 years.
At the time of its construction, it was the distillery showplace of the universe. And it was built specifically to be that. It's important to remember that E.H. Taylor was a marketer. We've talked about marketing. He was a marketer more so than a bourbon maker. He knew how to make bourbon. He knew how to write his mash recipe. He knew all that. But he also knew how to sell it.
So E.H. Taylor was a pure whiskey enthusiast in a time when there were a lot of whiskey rectifiers or whiskey blenders. And when he went over to Europe in the 1860s, something he noticed is that nobody over there was consuming any American whiskey because they didn't view it as having a worthwhile reputation. So when he returned back home and started his career here in Kentucky, he was on a mission the entire time to elevate the reputation of American whiskey. At the very least, he wanted folks everywhere around the world to consider his product worthy of consumption. So that's why we get things like the 1897 Bottled in Bond Act, where he solidifies this pure whiskey as a legal entity so that it's protected by law. And that's so that those whiskey rectifiers can't ruin his efforts of elevating that reputation. And building a site like this, something so beautiful, a site where it was not only production but hospitality all rolled into one. It was the idea was that if he built it, people would come, and he would start to elevate this. He would start to solidify American whiskey as the product that he knew it could be, not the rough and tumble product that it was when he first came into the pure whiskey world. All in the name of helping people see the light about American whiskey. E.H. Taylor got himself elected the mayor of Frankfort while he was under construction out here at the Old Taylor Distillery. And he managed to use his political influence to extend his rail line to a train depot that he built right here on our property. He humbly named it Taylorton Station, and he would commission private rail cars from Chicago, New York, and New Orleans and bring the American elite of his day right here to the heart of rural central Kentucky. And he would throw Grand Derby parties, bank conferences, and press trips. All the while, he was putting his pure whiskey into the hands of each and every one of his visitors.
Despite Colonel E.H. Taylor's significant contributions to bourbon tourism, Prohibition unraveled much of his work. Although the distillery reopened under National Distillers, it functioned solely as a production facility. It was not until 2014 that this magnificent site was restored to its original purpose, a central hub for celebrating the heritage and craft of whiskey making.
At this point, we get to talk about Will Arvin, our founding partner out here at Castle and Key Distillery. Is still our owner today. His family owns and operates Castle and Key. It's a true privilege to work for the Arvin family. It's very, very special to work for a privately owned and operated distillery. So Will, the story famously goes that he was sitting at Keeneland one day and he didn't have a passion project in his life. Very fulfilling career, wonderful family, but there was still a piece that he felt was missing. So I like to say that Will went about problem solving the only way any good old Kentucky boy could truly know how to. I mean, he's a lawyer from Nicholasville, Kentucky. And he was sitting there drinking some bourbon, watching the horses go by at Keeneland, and he Googles distilleries for sale. He figures that his passion project ought to be the lifeblood of Kentucky itself, right? Bourbon. So as he went through those Google searches, there were not a whole lot of results that came from it, but this dilapidated old property, or the old Taylor property, was one of them that came up. Finally was out here in early 2013, February 2013, for their first site visit. And Will fell in love with this historic property, right? He could see the bones of what E.H. Taylor had left behind out here, even though at the time it looked like a scene from The Walking Dead or something from a post-apocalyptic world. But he fell in love with it right away. He knew he had to bring this place back to life. He knew he couldn't do it alone, so taking a year and a half to get some financing in order, bringing on some business partners. By April 2014, they purchased 113 acres and 27 structures, all in terrible shape. Terribly in disrepair. Like, a lot of them were missing roofs and had lead paint and asbestos just everywhere. It took 4 long years of restoration to finally bring the property back to a place that we could have the public come enjoy this space again. Castle and Key has always tried to just celebrate the legacy that E.H. Taylor left behind out here. There are a lot of distilleries have a lot of land or acreage and property, but not a whole lot of distilleries have a lot of that space open to the public. E.H. Taylor did, and in that same vein, Castle and Key does as well. So we are trying to celebrate this space as a true piece of Kentucky history and a place where you can come and enjoy the day. It's not just to come and experience the products. It is come out here and enjoy yourself, right? It is a destination, and it's always been about celebrating that, because there is so much out here to see and do beyond the spirits that we offer, even though that they are wonderful, but there is a whole lot to offer out here. So we have weddings, we host events, we like to throw outdoor concert series and bring the public out to enjoy the grounds after hours and things like that. So it's as much about celebrating bourbon as it is about celebrating what Kentucky has to offer as a destination. We did take a little bit of what we knew about E.H. Taylor's bourbon, the fact that he used white corn for his bourbon. We also used white corn for our Castle and Key bourbon, but that is where our tribute to him sort of stops. We know that white corn just gives our bourbon a little bit of a softer taste, and we really appreciate that quality. And we have always been trying to create our own legacy as Castle and Key, while also celebrating the rich tradition that E.H. Taylor established here, both with quality whiskey and a quality guest experience. One of the things that we are doing for all of our aged spirits is releasing them in small batches. So this is very similar to a wine vintage model. When we filled our first barrel in December 2016, we took a look around at our peers, and we recognized that a lot of people were following the same model, where you have one standard flavor profile that you're blending most of your barrels to match. And while that's a wonderful strategy, we were very early on in our whiskey production process, and we wanted to leave ourselves open to the possibility that we could make a better whiskey tomorrow, next year, or 6 years down the road. So we decided not to lock ourselves into one single flavor profile, and decided instead to focus more on a consistency of style when it comes to the whiskey production, instead of a consistency of flavor. So as you're drinking Castle and Key, if you are really enjoying that pour, be sure to find the batch number that you're enjoying and go buy as many bottles of that batch as you can get your hands on. The flip side of that is that if you're ever enjoying some Castle and Key and you're thinking, this isn't quite the whiskey for me, that's okay. Just try the next batch and the next batch and the next batch, because I promise no two will taste exactly the same.
These 3 distilleries, Old Taylor, Old Crow, and OFC, weave together the narrative of Frankfort's bourbon history. As you walk the grounds, tour the facilities, and savor the meticulously crafted bourbons they produce, remember that you're not just tasting a spirit, you're sipping from the very wellspring of tradition and innovation that has flowed through this town for centuries. As we continue our journey through the stories of the distilleries and the individuals who shaped the bourbon industry, it's important to mention that these weren't the only 3 distilleries that helped put Frankfort on the map. Many others contributed just as much.
You know, Jim Beam should not go without mention. While they're not distilling here, you know, it's a major bottling plant, a major industry here in Frankfort, and they've been a great partner in tourism and many other things here in Frankfort. So, you know, while they're not open for tours or anything like that, you know, they still are an important player. And in fact, when we, you know, 10 years ago, we had about 150 guests here from Australia, and Jim Beam's master distiller came out and gave everybody a tasting. And so they engage with the community in a lot of different ways. And so we really appreciate having them too. And they bring jobs and revenues and things like that. So.
Additionally, we must recognize another unlikely unsung hero of Frankfort's bourbon legacy, Rebecca Ruth Chocolates. Positioned at the heart of Frankfort's picturesque historic quarter, Rebecca Ruth Chocolates stands as a sweet testament to resilience and innovation. Founded during Prohibition, this iconic candy company has become intertwined with Frankfort's history, infusing the city with the flavors of bourbon and the sweetness of tradition. With each handmade confection, Rebecca Ruth Chocolates pays homage to the indomitable spirit of this city and its enduring love affair with bourbon. Let's dive deeper into their story and their pivotal role in preserving Frankfort's rich heritage.
Rebecca Ruth Candy was started in 1919 by two women. Their names were Rebecca Gooch and then Ruth Hanley, later known as Ruth Hanley Boo. And they began making candy in the Gooch House, which is actually down the street from our current location here on 2nd Street. But they began making candy for friends and family as Christmas gifts, etc. So when they began their business back in 1919, it was an odd time for women to start businesses because a lot of businesses were primarily male-owned and male-started. So for two women during that time to start a business was just kind of unheard of, but we're still here today, and I'm the 4th generation, so now we're kind of coming full circle and kind of going back into the female leadership here.
Rebecca Ruth Candy started in 1919, which is during Prohibition. So we didn't originally make bourbon balls, chocolates. After the repeal of Prohibition, we started making bourbon balls in 1936. And it really has become a world-famous product, and it is growing in its appeal since we invented them. It's been one of our flagship product lines. In the 70s and 80s, when the bourbon industry was somewhat in a decline, we weren't really affected by that as much as we were the increase in the cost of sugar in the 70s. So we had some effect from that, but otherwise, people still were buying chocolates. We've stayed in Frankfort because we've had such a wonderful support by the community. They've really embraced us and helped us through our hard times. In over 100 years, we've had a lot of hard times, and the community of Frankfort, Kentucky has really grabbed us by the heart and has kept us vital.
Can you feel it? There is an aura here in the old Rick House. I still get goosebumps when I walk through here. I think about the spirit and the souls of those that put so much into it, those that came before. I'm proud to have aided and assisted in some way the building of 7 other distilleries in this central Kentucky region. Some I helped build hands-on, some I designed, some I financed, some I consulted, but my thumbprint was on each one. I'm most proud of my Bottled in Bond Act. Important because it guaranteed the integrity of the product and protected our consumers. Our customers knew that what was in that bottle was exactly what it said on that label. Crafted in a single season, crafted in a single distillery, and aged in a government-controlled warehouse. Top shelf, and it's still with us today. Very proud of the things we have done and the commitment of so many other people.
The revival of these distilleries holds the promise of a rich and vibrant future for the bourbon industry in the region. These historic distilleries, once integral to the heritage of American whiskey making, are being revitalized to not only honor their legacy, but also to shape the trajectory of bourbon production in Frankfort. As they breathe new life into the aged grounds and storied buildings, these distilleries are poised to become more than just attractions. They are set to become centers of innovation, tradition, and community. Alongside this revival, new bourbon life is being created with newer distilleries opening up in Frankfort, ready to play just as much a part in the future of bourbon as the three we have been talking about.
Our newer distilleries like Whiskey Thief and J. Mattingly that have located here, from a visitor perspective, offer a different take on the bourbon industry. So they're offering, different ways to blend. They're not, necessarily big factories, so to speak. So they're offering really sort of unique experiences. I know Whiskey Thief with their corn that grows right there on site, and Mattingly with the way they can blend the different samples from the different barrels, all of that. It's just a completely different experience, something new, and it's just broadening, I think, the way people can learn about bourbon and experience it.
Hi there, welcome in. Thanks for stopping by at Whiskey Thief. If you're here to do a tasting, we got a couple different options for you here today. This station over here, we got some stuff for you to try. We got 5 barrels. These first 4 right here are all bourbons. Very last one right here is a rye whiskey. As you go through your self-paced tasting, no time limit, feel free to come in, relax, hang out. That chalkboard right there breaks down what you guys will be having. So your first 4 bourbons, B1 through 4, very last one's the rye whiskey. You got your age, your proof, and your mash bill there for you. If you're interested, I can get you a little sample of the whiskey right now. This big copper tube I'm using to pour for you all is what we call the Whiskey Thief. It's what we get our name from. It's basically just a glorified straw, but it's a pretty nifty little instrument to be using. If you guys decide to stop on by anytime during the summer, we've got a cocktail bar and a food truck out on our back patio. Fire pit, cornhole boards outside, live music in the afternoons. It's a good place to just come on by, hang out, take your time, and enjoy your afternoon.
Frankfort's going to continue to grow. There's plenty of agricultural land that other distilleries can move into in Frankfort. There's plenty of waterways, being different creeks, different rivers. There's plenty of opportunity to new places to come into. And the history of Kentucky is already here. The history of distilleries are already here. It's a political hub because it's the capital of Kentucky. It's a halfway point between the big city of Louisville, the big city of Lexington. You can travel from Bardstown closely, being BG Parkway to 127. I mean, it's really just, it's a solid transportation hub of distillery travel here. And you also have all the natural resources that anyone could ever dream of as a distiller.
By blending the timeless art of distillation with modern experiences and a renewed commitment to quality, these distilleries are rekindling the spirit of the past while propelling the bourbon industry forward. Their revival serves as a testament to the enduring allure of bourbon, attracting enthusiasts and connoisseurs alike to experience firsthand the captivating journey from grain to glass.
That's one of the greatest honors of what we do here. You know, it was just about a week and a half ago, I had some guests come in and they spotted my AAA 10-year and they said, I want to pour that. And, you know, as they're drinking it, I'm watching them go down memory lane. And then someone else comes in and they see the bottle out on the counter and they want to pour that. And I'm watching three people connect with memories and emotions and community that they had spent drinking that bottle years ago. And it's such an honor. It really feels like a special feeling to be able to be in the presence of people that can connect in community over that way. Whether it's a new pour that they're just discovering, or whether it's an old favorite that they're connecting with fond memories, is just really special. Yeah.
I think Frankfort's going to continue to help promote bourbon-related industries because that's a driving force that's bringing people here. I guess the market will tell, what's going to happen in 5, 10, 15 years, who knows? But I think, projections are that interest in bourbon is not diminishing. Everything that I'm hearing from research done by state government and others is that the trajectory of bourbon tourism is continuing, at least into the future, for the next 5, 10 years.
And we have tourists that come in to tour our factory, and they're coming in increasing numbers all the time. From what I can tell, the interest in Frankfort, Kentucky, due to bourbon is increasing our business, and the experience that people are having while they're here in Frankfort is very positive.
Honestly, I think the future is yet to be determined. I think the future is in the hands of the next generation. It's been proven that this is a money-making industry, but it's going to have to evolve as people grow and change. People my age ain't gonna be around much longer. There's a whole new generation that will need to be exposed. And the product will have to keep up. The marketing, especially the marketing, will have to keep up.
The interest is definitely different in the bourbon industry now because more people are getting into bourbon. I mean, that's why I don't think there's a bust anywhere. There's more people drinking bourbon. More women are drinking bourbon. There's more bourbon used in cocktails, even for cooking. So there's more people involved in the passion of bourbon. So there's more visitors coming out, and so that's why I don't see an end to it.
Buffalo Trace's mission statement: honor tradition, embrace change. I can't think of a better place to do that. Behind me here is an example of our honoring tradition plus embracing the change that we are so well known for. The newer structure on the front there is a new still put in and completed in November of 2022. Just behind it, the still house that was completed in the 1930s, and arguably behind all of this, the stuff that existed prior to that back into the 1800s. We are literally history built on history, and this place is the finest example of bourbon and Kentucky history that I can think of.
I'm extremely proud. I'm beyond proud of the legacy that we have built here in Frankfort, Kentucky. It extends beyond our city. It extends globally and continues to shape the bourbon industry. Let's raise a glass to celebrate my town, Frankfort, Kentucky.
The city of Frankfort and bourbon have always intermingled in part due to Colonel E.H. Taylor Jr., Dr. James C. Crow, Colonel Albert Blanton, and the many others who have worked at Frankfort's distilleries in the past. And like a great bourbon, Frankfort has aged just as gracefully. And that's what makes Frankfort, Kentucky, the heart of bourbon.
The Frankfort Bourbon Society was founded in May of 2017 with the idea that we would educate our members about bourbon and distilling and the history of bourbon in Frankfort and the surrounding areas. Our first president was Charlie Jones. Charlie was known for his passion of bourbon and the history of bourbon in the Frankfort area. And we continue his vision of promoting bourbon and the history of bourbon in the Frankfort area by inviting in distillers and distilleries, bourbon-related historians and authors to share information with us, sometimes to share bourbon with us. And, you know, the educational part comes in when they are able to tell us how and why they do things the way they do in making their products. And another thing we do is single barrel picks at distilleries. When we have the opportunity, we will take a group of our members to a distillery. We will get to try several barrels of bourbon, select our favorite, then have that bottled and made available exclusively to our members. Another thing that we do that I think is very unique for the Frankfort Bourbon Society, and this was Charlie's idea, was we pair with a local distillery, Whiskey Thief, and every year they help us develop a proprietary mash bill and distill that for us. We have several barrels currently aging out there, and when those barrels are ready, we will bottle those and sell those exclusively to our members.